Scott Wheeler, I mean, you're an investigative journalist. I hope you've been following what John Solomon and Sarah Carter are doing because, it seems that there's a lot of feigning of outrage and a lot of selective moral outrage because we do know for a fact, and it was proven after a congressional investigation, that the Obama administration used taxpayer money. And what were they trying to do? They were trying to unseat the prime minister of Israel, one of our closest allies. Is that not true?
Well, that is absolutely true, Sean, as you know. And let me point out something that very few people are talking about. First of all, I think that this is a canard to begin with, that somehow the Russians and Putin wanted Trump elected to begin with. As you know, I've written in Forbes magazine that Putin had to have been rooting for Hillary Clinton. The Obama and Clinton were like silly putty to him, including handing over 10 Russian spies in 2010 who had, according to the Washington Post, connections to both Obama and Clinton. Now, why were those spies not deposed, and why did Obama rush them out of the country back to a hero's welcome in Moscow in 2010 after the FBI had run a multi-year investigation of this so-called sleeper cell? There's another more interesting fact that came out in documents that a former Soviet president released, and that is that Ted Kennedy had worked with top aides to Yuri Andropov at the time, the current, who was at the time the premier of the Soviet Union, to help defeat President Reagan. This is unbelievable. If they want election interference, here you had a U.S. senator sending messages through his top aide.
It's funny you bring this up. I had forgotten all about that. This is 100% true, this story you're telling. It's 100% accurate.
I'm reading it from a quote from Forbes magazine that says Kennedy's message was simple. He proposed an unabashed quid pro quo. Kennedy would lend Andropov a hand in dealing with President Reagan. In return, the Soviet leader would lend the Democrat Party a hand in challenging Reagan in the 1984 presidential election. Now, furthermore, if they want foreign interference in an American election, let's look at 1992 and 1996. I produced an entire documentary on this called Trading with the Enemy back in 2000, where the Communist Chinese poured millions, perhaps tens of millions of dollars into Bill Clinton's reelection campaign. Sean, you covered this very well at the time also, where they poured millions of dollars through communist Chinese agents. At the same time, Bill Clinton was decontrolling strategic weapons technology to the communist Chinese at the very same time. And the Democrats not only weren't interested in that, they ran shotgun for the Clinton administration's disinformation campaign trying to prevent the investigations.
Charlie Tree, John Wong, I remember all the work I did on this. You're absolutely right. All right, guys, stay right there. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll finish this on the other side. Our News Roundup Information Overload Hour is coming up at the top of the hour. Still so much to get to in the course of today's program. I don't know how we get it all in, but we're going to make it happen. We'll look at healthcare solutions, free market, that are not even being discussed by anybody, which frustrates me to know. All right, as we continue, Jack Barsky, former KGB spy. He wrote the book Deep Undercover. Scott Wheeler, Army vet, former investigative journalist. And, of course, we're talking about James Comey and the fact that everyone's so shocked that he announced that, yes, the Russians did try to influence the 2016 elections, which they've done in the past, which they're going to do in 2018, which they're going to do in 2020, which is what goes on in the world of espionage. You know, Jack, what's kind of amazing to me is the level of, I guess, ignorance that I get from people. It seems that they're almost totally unaware that this level of spying and surveillance and espionage goes on between big countries all the time. It never stops. Why is this surprising? Has anybody not watched Homeland? For crying out loud!
Well, you shouldn't have to watch TV, but the bottom line is that espionage has been around as long as there have been feuding countries on the planet, and this is a weapon that you have in your arsenal, and you use it. And we would be foolish not to use that weapon to the extent we can. And this like holier than thou attitude is just like off the wall wrong. It's like I compare this. The United States was the first country that had an atomic weapon for a good reason. We are on the right side of history, and so this, as I said, the holier than thou attitude by far left-wing folks is atrocious and leads to nothing but a erosion of what we call probably the last bastion of freedom in the world.
Scott, I'd hate to think of a world without covert operations, without intelligence, without plausible deniability, because I wouldn't want to be guessing what the Iranians, the North Koreans, the Chinese, and I even think Putin is a bad character in some ways, in many ways in his own state. Look at Ukraine. Look at Crimea. Look at some of these other issues that he's been involved in that are very questionable. Intelligence, lets us have knowledge to make good decisions about national security. It's a smart thing to do.
Absolutely, it is, and we rely heavily on clandestine operations to provide us with information about the bad actors in the world. It is absolutely necessary. But, in this case, I have still yet to see evidence that Russia was trying to help Trump get elected, as the New York Times has alleged, when today they say President Trump's campaign and Russia's efforts to sabotage Hillary Clinton.
I don't get it either. And Comey was so direct about it yesterday, as was Admiral Rogers. I'm like, can we see that evidence, please? All right, Scott, thank you. Jack, thank you. I've got to run. 800-941